What's up, y'all? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's Kelly Matthews, and today we're gonna go through my top 5 exercises for growing your quad muscles. I'm gonna walk you through them, give you form tips, common mistakes, so you know best practices for growing your quads. Let's get into it. The first exercise we're gonna do is a barbell back squat, tried and true. But it's important that you know that there are certain things you need to do in order to get the maximum quad stimulus out of your back squat. You'll see a lot of back squats look really hingy, and that's fine, but that's not what we're doing today. So the first thing I'm gonna do is put my lifters on, my squat shoes. And as you can see, there is a lift in the heel, which is gonna put me at a slight incline. If you don't have lifters, a lot of gyms will have these squat wedges, which as you can see, have the same effect. If you don't have that, you can use some small plates. And the reason we're gonna do that is it puts us in a better position to get into a deeper squat, which just by nature is going to engage the quads more. I'm not gonna go through the minutia of, setting up your rack or just basics you need to know about where to go for your squat. If you need more information about that, I've already done a video on it, so you can refer back to that. Once you have your rack set up for your back squat, you wanna make sure you're holding tension here, that the bar is kind of wedged onto your back. You're gonna stand it up, take your walk out. It should be 3 steps total. We're always gonna take our big breath in. And really what today is about is getting into deep knee flexion. So once we get down to the bottom, the goal is to get really low with tension and then drive up and out of the hole. Everybody's range of motion is going to be different, obviously. Not everybody can squat ass to grass on command, and that's okay. But the heel lift is going to be what helps you get deeper into that squat, especially if you're limited in ankle mobility. So the goal with a squat is to have a vertical translation of your pelvis. So you're trying to sit straight down, keeping your torso pretty upright here. Once we get into a squat position where we're pushing our hips way back and your torso is dipping forward, that's more of a horizontal movement of your pelvis, right? And it's not wrong, and it's not that you're not going to train your quads at all. You're just not maximizing the amount of quad stimulus that you can get in a squat, which again is what today is all about. So you want to think about keeping your torso pretty vertical, sitting down as low as you can while keeping tension. So don't just bottom out and rest here. You want to keep that tension, and then you're going to drive up and out, accelerating, getting full extension at the top. Let's do a working set. Also could do a barbell front squat, but the reason why I don't have that on this list, although it is technically more quad focused than the back squat, it's a lot harder to load heavier on a front squat. Naturally, your front squat is going to be a lot lighter than your back squat, and it's really difficult for people to do. It's tough wrist positioning. It's a great exercise, but most of the time you're not going to see a barbell front squat in a bodybuilder's program. And when we're talking about building up your quad muscles, we want to just have an order of operations. So that's why a barbell front squat isn't on this list. If you want a front-loaded squat, my biggest suggestion would be to do heavy goblet squats. And that's something that you want to master before you even come to the barbell for a barbell back squat. So let's do a set of goblet squats so you can see what those look like as well. Up next, we have the pendulum squat. The pendulum squat for me is the holy grail of quad training. It's just so good. Your quads are under tension throughout the entire squat. You get no breaks whatsoever, and you can get just like the biggest range of motion and sit as low as you possibly can and just hammer your quads. I love it so much. Not every gym is going to have a pendulum squat. If you have a hack squat, that's going to be kind of interchangeable with the pendulum. When you get set up, a lot of pendulum squats will have a little stopper at the bottom here so that, if you get stuck, it'll rest on that stopper. I either put it all the way down, or I think for this one, I'm just going to take it all the way out so that I can get really low into my squat. You're going to get into it, and your shoulders will go right underneath this pad. And usually it'll have a relatively long platform for your feet that's at an incline. That may be adjustable or not. If it's adjustable, you want it to be at a pretty steep angle, just like this one. You always want to take a warm-up set. A lot of these machines will be pretty heavy, even with no weight on the bar. So I'm always going to take a warm-up set with no weight on it. So to unrack it, you're just going to stand it up. And on this one, this handle has a hook so that you can take it down to the bottom of the squat. So you're going to pull that back, make sure that stays there. You can either hold here. I'm a little too short to hold on to this, so I usually will hold on to these shoulder pads. In terms of foot positioning, you want to find the place where you can get lowest into your squat without your heels lifting. So if I'm way down here and my heels lift up off the platform, that's not a great place for me to be. So for me, I like to live somewhere in the middle here. If you get way too high up here, then you're not able to really get as much flexion in your knees, which is what we're trying to do. So what a good pendulum squat looks like is always taking a big breath in. You have the pad here for feedback, so think about pushing your low back into the pad behind you, and then you're going to come all the way down. As you can see, like my hamstrings are running into my calves, and my butt is almost touching my heels here. So I'm getting as low as I can, and then driving through my feet and getting almost to full extension. You don't have to lock your knees out, but it's not a terrible thing if you end up locking them out at the top. And then from there, big breath in. All right, I'm gonna put a plate on here. Number 3 is going to be our seated leg extension. We love the leg extension because it's one of the only movements that's going to train our rectus femoris, which is one of your big quad muscles, and it crosses at the knee and at the hip. So you need to be in this position, loading in this position, in order to fully train that quad muscle. This and the sissy squat are going to be two of really the only exercises where you get that same stimulus. And the beauty of machines in general is it's pretty hard to mess it up. The machine does a lot of the work for you, so you can really just send it effort-wise and not really worry about injury or messing up the exercise. So in terms of setup for your leg extension, they're all going to be a little bit different. That's the one thing that's frustrating, is no one leg extension is going to be exactly the same as the other. But there's a few rules of thumb that you should know when you're sitting in your leg extension machine. A, you want this foot pad to be at your ankle or maybe slightly above. You don't want it like way down on your toes to the point where you're having to like grip it with your feet. So that's the first thing. And then the back of your seat usually will be adjustable. And you want to just make sure that your knee joints pretty much line up with the joint of the machine. somebody really strong was on this. So as your knee joints flex and extend, you can see that it lines up with where the machine lifts and lowers, or kind of like where it all attaches. So if your seat is too far forward, your knees are going to be sticking out too far. If you're too far back, you're going to just be in an uncomfortable position. So this one's nice because it kind of just adjusts to where you're sitting. When you're getting into position with the leg extension, you want to think about pulling yourself into the seat. There's always going to be handles here, but if you have shorter arms, it might be hard or awkward to hold on to them. If that's the case, you can hold on to the seat, but you really do want to kind of pull your butt down into the seat and kind of pull your ribs and tuck your tail. And then from there, it's literally just an extension, getting all the way straight through your knees, and then lowering down with control. Ideally, your leg extension is going to allow you to get into pretty deep knee flexion. So there might be an adjustment here to where, like you're not getting much out of going this far. So if you have the option, you want to set it so that it's pretty far back, so that even when you're at the bottom of the leg extension, your quads are still under load here. If you're doing it right, you should want to jump off the machine afterwards. The last two exercises are going to be our unilateral exercises, which means you're doing single leg. First is going to be a Bulgarian split squat. I did these in our glute video. These are going to be a quad-focused variation of the Bulgarian split squat, so it's going to look different than the glute-focused version. You notice that I have brought the squat wedge into the equation here. This is not required, but can be helpful in getting more engagement in the quad. Just like with the squats, it's just going to put our heel at a slight incline, and it'll make it easier for us to focus more on the quad. So in terms of setup, if you're using a wedge, or you could use your squat shoes or just something to slightly elevate your heels, you're going to elevate your non-working foot, laces down. And usually I like to load with two hands. You could do single arm. It's really up to you. You're going to be able to go heavier holding 2 dumbbells versus 1. And the biggest difference is going to be in the position of your descent. So instead of bringing your torso slightly forward and keeping your shin a little more vertical, you're now going to be thinking about the forward translation of your knee. So you're going to stay really upright with your torso, and you're going to send your knee toward your toes. So as I come down, my knee's going to come forward. I'm bending into that back knee. You're going to get to a place where your knee is no longer moving forward, and it's going to shift back slightly. You actually want to stop just short of that spot. Okay, so once you get to the point where your knee can't really go forward anymore, you're going to come up from there. And that's what's going to keep us in that quad versus really kind of transferring that load into our glute. Okay, so I'm going to grab my dumbbells, working with my left leg. My left heel is slightly elevated. Again, keeping my torso really upright. I'm going to send that knee forward, making sure it's tracking over my big toe. Come down as low as I can without it shifting back, and then I'm going to drive up. You're better off doing these pretty slow, even though it sucks really bad, and holding yourself accountable to just go until your knee doesn't go forward anymore. It's going to feel like a totally different exercise than the glute-focused split squat that we did. So in terms of mistakes that you might make, I already mentioned some of them, is just turning it more into a glute-focused exercise. So diving your chest forward and turning it more into a hinge, keeping that shin more vertical. We don't want to do that. You also want to make sure that as you come down, what I see a lot, and this is something I do too, is your knee might want to push out toward your pinky toes. You want to track that baby in, and you should feel your adductor or your groin along the inside here kind of turn on as you pull that knee in alignment with this foot and with this hip. That's just a good general rule of thumb. So if you're out here, pull it back in here. Other than that, just stick to the program and you'll be good. Fifth and final exercise is going to be a dumbbell walking lunge. Everybody hates these. Nobody wants to do them, but I love these as a quad training exercise. And there's a couple ways that I'm going to demonstrate how you can do them. One is going to be the way that you see most people do walking lunges, which is alternating sides. Love that. We're also going to do a single side walking lunge, which is one that I've really leaned into recently to work on one leg and then work on the other. And the reason why I like the walking lunge versus like a reverse lunge is you are more focused when you're stepping forward with that leg, just like when we worked on that forward translation of the knee on the split squats. It's a similar idea here versus when you step back into a reverse lunge, you're definitely still training the quad, but it's just by nature going to be a little bit more glute focused. So I'm going to grab my weights. And there's a few things to think about when you're going into a walking lunge. When you take a step forward, you want to step at a distance that leaves you, if you touch the ground with that knee, basically in a half kneeling position. So if you take a really big step, that back leg is going to be like almost straight. You don't want that. You want to step so that you end up in a split squat position, and you want to have a good bend in the knee. It's pushing toward your toes. We don't need to come down to the floor and barrel our knee into the ground, but you do want to get a little tap of your knee, and then you're going to step forward and go to the other side. Okay, so with the weights, it's going to look like this. We'll step forward with the left. I'm going to slightly shift the orientation of my hips over to that left side. So you'll see just like a slight shift. I'm going to frame that front foot. I'm going to step forward, and then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. So as you can see, I slightly shift my weight over that way, push my knee forward, and then drive through that foot to step forward. If you're going to do single side, it's the same thing. The only difference is when you take a step forward and go back to your starting position, now we're going to step forward with the same leg. So I'm only working with my right leg, and it just gives me a little more time under tension on just that single side rather than alternating sides. But all the same principles apply to where I'm sitting over to that side a little bit, pushing that knee forward, driving through that foot to stand up. All right, that's a wrap on my top 5 exercises to grow your quads. Exercise selection is really important when it comes to growing a muscle group, but the other important component is training close enough to failure so that you are actually getting the stimulus in the muscle required to grow the muscle. Your rep ranges don't matter too much, anywhere from 6 reps to 30 reps. As long as you are training close to failure or to failure, you're going to see growth in that muscle. So when you go to program for your quad exercises, just make sure you're keeping that in mind. Thanks for joining me today, guys. If you want to hear more from me, please subscribe to my channel, or you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Kelly L. Matthews. See you guys soon.